Hi everyone. This video deals with yet another advanced topic in Agent.ai, and this is about leveraging web API integrations from an Agent.ai agent. And so the way you can access this functionality is if you go to Add Action and you go to the Advanced tab, you can now click on Invoke Web API. And this particular video is going to talk about how to leverage this particular functionality in Agent.ai. So before we get into what it is, how it works, all that stuff, I think it's again useful to talk about why you might want to call a web API. This is again an advanced topic. If you are here, chances are you are a developer or you know what a web API is. So it's not about talking about what a web API is. Uh, but it's about extending your agent to go get information through an API from some other external system. And so that's what a web API does. You kind of pass it some parameters and it will return some other parameters in as a response. And so, for example, you could have a web API where I could take a set of inputs from a user in Agent AI and I could go upload it into a Google Sheet. So I could have a web API that updates my Google Sheet and takes information from Agent AI. I could, on the reverse, have an API that actually reads a Google Sheet and then pulls the information from that. So again, the APIs are very flexible and it again talks to the extensibility of Agent.ai and your ability to connect to other systems to do certain specific things that you might not want to do directly in Agent.ai. So with that context, the example I have here is actually, this is not really a real example in terms of it doesn't drive any kind of business value, but it's purely to show you how this functionality works. And so I am connecting to an agent that is an API, web API that's available through Postman. It's a free public test API. And all it does is if you give it a name, so if I give it my name and then I give it a message, what it is going to do is it's just going to play back the message for me. That's all the agent does. Uh, you are talking about calling a web API. And so if I pass this on, what is going to happen is this is going to take this input, call my API, and all the API is going to return is pretty much the same message. And so while that is running, I'm going to go quickly jump into the agent itself to show you how it works. We have kind of the usual settings tab, the name of the agent, the description, it's going to be triggered manually. And then from an action standpoint, so the first two actions are very, everybody knows this one. It's text, enter a name, out underscore name, enter a message, out underscore message. And now what I want to do is to somehow be able to pass these two variables to my API. And so this is the URL of the API. So every API that you connect to has a URL that you need to know. It has certain methods. There's post, get, and so again, whenever you're calling an API, chances are you're talking to a developer, you're talking to somebody who built the API who'll tell you what the method is. Is this a post, in which case you're posting some information, and then you'll get a response back. Or if it's a get, then you're just calling it and it just returns a response back. And so you need to know what kind of method it is. Uh, and then there are certain headers and information that needs to be passed. So in this case, I'm saying that I'm going to pass you JSON objects. And so that's the header type that you put over here. The key is that the syntax is very, very specific. If you're a little off, it won't work. So you got your curly braces, and then the content type is in within double quotes, colon, double quotes, application slash JSON. So this is how you pass a header to your API. And then same thing with the body. And again, this is very critical is you have to have it in this format. It's while it says body JSON, it's got to be kind of a single line JSON. So in this case, what I'm saying is I am passing a JSON where object. The first attribute is name, and this the value of that is out underscore name, the value that I put into my input here, and it has to be within this kind of double curly out underscore name double curly will put the value from that whatever you entered as the name. It has to be within double quotes here, and then comma, and then again, this is the second attribute, which is the message. And again, within double quotes, you put the variable in there. And I put a little exclamation mark so that, after the message, it puts a little exclamation mark. And then that gets stored to the response. And so that's how you call a web API. And then after that, I'm just taking it, I'm then formatting it and returning it. And so if I go back to my agent, which should have run by now, you'll notice API response summary. You can see the name which was passed, the message that was, uh, we're talking about calling a web API. And then this has all the details on how it was passed and whatever the headers are and stuff. So if you wanted more details on what it is, if you were to go to the development console and you wanted to look at, some of these variables that are being passed, so in the REST call, you'll notice I'm calling that, I'm passing this message, and I'm passing this name. And then we should see in the response, the message that comes back, you are talking about calling a web API and the name. And so this shows you what came back from the calling the web API. And so the key, absolute key to making the web API work properly is to make sure that you are mapping the parameters exactly and following the right syntax. If you're even a little off, if there's a little quote here or a quote there, or that sentence is not a string that looks like that, it will not work. So hopefully you find this useful on how to